Hello, and welcome to Bookish Haze, a podcast where we get to talk about two of our favorite things, Taylor Swift and reading. I'm Katie.
And I'm Samine, and every episode we're going to take a book or series and analyze the characters as they relate to songs across Taylor Swift's entire discography. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bookish Haze. We are so excited for this week because we have finally read Sunrise on the Reaping. And I say finally, it literally came out on March 18th, and it really just I don't think I've ever run to the bookstore quite as fast as I did for this and actually end up reading it because the speed to the bookstore for Onyx Storm was not followed by reading it super fast. This book, though, was really easy to eat up. What did you think?
Well, I was just going to say, yes, we are historically bad at we may have read the book in time, but we do not put out a podcast on it until months later. So this is progress for us. Okay, so we've chatted a little bit about this, and I don't know if you picked up on the vibe, but I didn't want to say anything until we got to the podcast. I don't think I liked it as much as you did.
Ooh,
but I am glad that you enjoyed it a lot. I think it's a me problem though, because I think so overall book I think was great in the sense of Suzanne Collins is really good at writing. I think that I loved, getting the chance to see a bunch of characters that we know from the Hunger Games series in their earlier days, and kind of get background about other certain things that were maybe talked about in the Hunger Games book, but obviously never really explored. But I think I wanted less just the straightforward book of this is Haymitch's games. Here's what happened, and then here's what happened after, and how his family died, and how Leonore Dove died, and then short epilogue talking a little bit about the Hunger Games, and that's it. I think I wanted more of okay, quick recap, not quick, but some recap of his games and kind of what he went through, and then I wanted to hear more about the after effects. Obviously we got that he started drinking and pushing everyone away, but I wanted to hear about okay, mentoring the tributes, what was that the first few years, and how did developing his relationship with Effie go? Not relationship in the romantic sense, but just obviously she was there through the years. So I think I wanted more post games than I got, which again is a me problem.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think for one, what I wanted was a lot of what we got of the games and then also before the games. And I feel for me, what ended up happening was a lot of those after pieces just felt like they came together in the way that the series of events happened, in the before and the during, if you will. I think that I kind of liked some of the ability to just infer why he was feeling a lot of the way that he was feeling, especially when you got to that last page and you were like, oh my God, he has to just consistently picture himself killing Lenora Dove consistently and just doing it by accident with her favorite treat that he just didn't realize it was the wrong, what was it, a gumdrop?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and just kind of I remember when I was reading it and I was sitting there and my initial reaction was literally I fully think I understand what drove him to that alcoholism and what drove him to be in this stupor. And I feel honestly, if I'd read a book where he was just in a stupor, that would have been really tough to have gotten through. But it was also very much the reaction of being wow, I cannot believe that he is only as drunk as he is. I think it could have been significantly worse just based on the things that happened initially alone. And so kind of inferring some of that healing was, I think, helpful. Also, honestly, I immediately went on TikTok and I saw all of those edits after. And I think the edits helped.
Yeah, no, I imagine they did. I feel I was avoiding because I didn't want to get spoilers since I wasn't sure I was actually going to be able to get it from the library, but luckily I was. Yeah, I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I think for me, the Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, I felt had more show don't tell, whereas I felt this book had more of that, or more of okay, so we're going up to this event and here he comes home, the house is on fire, everyone is dead, and then obviously you have the funerals, and then he meets Leonora Dove, and okay, here we are, okay, she picks up the gumdrops and she dies. And so I think I don't know. I guess I don't know how else you would have done it, but it felt way less I don't know. I just don't think I found them as impactful as I thought I would, which sounds like
Okay.
terrible to say. But I will say like that in terms of characters, it maybe makes more sense because, you know, Snow was so conniving and like in his head. And so you maybe get more of that in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, whereas like Haymitch was a lot more like in the moment, like reactionary. So it is kind of just like him taking the events as they go. So I think in that if that was like the case, like I think Suzanne Collins did a good job in that regard.
Yeah. I feel like that makes sense. It's very much like what she set out to do, she kind of did, but it could have been done in so many different ways. And it could have been like, and I think in this one, it's kind of that concept of like Suzanne Collins doesn't really write anything unless she has something to say. And I feel like
Hmm.
when it came to that concept of like talking about propaganda, she was very clear on that in this. And I feel like this wasn't necessarily meant to help us tie the Hunger Games books together. It was
Hmm.
meant to do something a little bit different. Which I feel like if we were trying to tie the books together, it would have, like you said, like I think that the way that you would have approached it would have made a little bit more sense.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. Like, I mean, it is a prequel, so like I can't be mad about it, which again, like I said, is why it's like my problem. I don't think it's a bad book, and I think like I get why people love it.
Hmm.
Um, it just like wasn't my favorite of them, I
That's
think.
fair.
And I which is sad because like I thought it would be a lot. Like I would enjoy it a lot more. But I think the movie will be great. So
Oh yeah,
they always
I'm
are.
very very excited for this movie, um, and just to see it all happen.
Yeah.
Not all of it happen. It was pretty gruesome. See some of it's happened.
Yeah.
um, what did you think? What was your rating as a whole?
I just gave it middle of the road. I gave it a 3.0.
Okay.
What about you?
Wow. I think I'm closer to a 4.5. So
I mean,
yeah,
that's
this makes
fair based
sense.
off of like our reactions. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like I didn't like anything about it. Like I really liked Maisie Lee's character development and also just like I think District 12 in general. Kind of
Yes.
seeing their bond move forward. Um I think like getting like Wyrus and Mags as like the mentors was really fun. Like I think I knew that happened, but I just didn't register. Like did they talk about it at some point?
I
Um
think they talked about, I think there was a mention in the book about like what happened when there wasn't a tribute available and like sometimes they would be assigned. I don't think we ever got that explicitly though, but there was just a lot of name dropping that
Oh yeah.
happened.
Literally everyone. Like, okay, I think I texted you about when Effie appeared. Like
Yes.
literally I loved that because I just didn't think she was going to be in the book for one thing, but also just like I didn't see it coming like that this was like her sister, which maybe is I forget if they ever gave us the her sister's last name. And I should have seen it coming, but I was like, "Oh my god, it's Effie."
Yeah, I don't think that they did. I think they only gave us first names.
Mhm.
Which like would make sense. Like you wouldn't necessarily know, like they wouldn't introduce like their first and last name always. It was a lot more just first name.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I really enjoyed that moment when she was like, "My sister is so cool," and she's gonna walk in, and I don't know what it was, but I was looking at it and I was like, "Someone's gonna walk in with some cool ass clothes," and then I was like, "Oh my god, it's gonna be Effie. Why is this gonna be Effie?" And then as she came in, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's Effie." Um, and I think I really liked how like it kind of showed that she stayed with District 12 through all of
Mhm.
that. And then I also really just enjoyed the theories and some of the reminders that people came up with around like why she kept mentioning that the trinkets were like kind of in deep shit, and like also the mention of like the blood on the funeral clothes. And I think I saw a theory that was like the trinkets were cannibals. And I just really forgot that cannibalism was a thing that happened during the first, like during that Dark Days space.
Wait, say more about
So
Oh, the trinket. Okay. Effie trinket. I was thinking you
Effie
meant like the
trinket.
tokens that
Oh, no, no,
the
no,
people
not the
moved in. I was
token.
like, I literally don't understand how that's possible. But yeah, okay, yes.
Yes. But speaking of the tokens, I also really loved this note where Maisley was like, I just really appreciate that her legacy started with her being like, I hate this fucking Mockingjay pin, putting it
Mhm.
away. And then she made everyone else's tokens. She gave them all something from home. And then it kind of came full circle in like in the Hunger Games books and coming up and having it be like Katniss's trinket. Like she didn't
Mhm.
stop providing trinkets for people.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that is really sweet.
I
Um,
agree. I think Maisie Lee's like character was so true to who she was like
yeah.
throughout the whole book. Like it was so consistent, while still making her likable by the end.
Mhm.
So yeah, I really liked her character.
Yeah, it was well done. And the piece about just like making her seem like she's a person. Because I feel like we saw that kind of throughout the games, and like everyone knows that that's kind of like what needs to happen is like a little bit of humanization, and this is how she did hers. I had a note on that too that I'm trying to remember.
Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna ask you because I know you said you had like a ton of notes, so
I
I
have
would love to hear them all.
Yes, I have 36 bullets. I was like, this. There's just so many things that happened.
It
I think
is.
so. We talked about like Maisie Lee, and her trinkets, and just kind of like that, like the way that they were humanized. I think the other thing that I kind of took on that was really interesting was just the changes that happened over the 25 years. Like it's just every 25 years they've really like improved, I guess, like the way that tributes are treated, and like they did a lot better, right? Like in the 25th Hunger Games, it was like very blatant rebellion. In the 50th Hunger Games, it continued to be pretty blatant rebellion, but it was like you didn't know that rebellion could happen until you were kind of in the arena, like Haymitch was. Um, and then I think it was really interesting how like all of the pomp and circumstance as it grew through the next 25 years, like you could see how well it worked just based on like one, Katniss being an unreliable narrator, but two, like the extent to which she didn't try to rebel, right? She was like full blown. She had no idea that rebellion was even happening because it was just such a pretty picture that had been painted despite like all the poverty and things like that. Like it was just by that point, because they had done so much better, I guess, because the Capitol had done better at painting their quote unquote posters, like it just showed up in such a way that she was like, yeah, this is too much for me to fight against. Whereas when the Capitol like treated them like shit, and like they were put in these like weird quarters, and kind of like they showed their hand too much in the initial two quarter quells that we saw, right? Or the initial two stories that we saw. And then from there, you just see that like their like their like I don't know, mirage, I guess, builds up more
Mhm.
and becomes more opaque, like you see how that impacts the rebellion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. Like, basically, Snow as the head, like, I mean, as we learned from Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, he like adapts constantly
Yeah.
and is, has his signature moves, but always like continues to iterate on them to make them really hit home over and over.
Hmm.
And each time it happens. So, yeah, I think that is very true. And I think it's a really good, I guess, like thing to call out because of, like you said, like Katniss is such an unreliable narrator, and yeah, we know she does not like really think about being part of the rebellion. Um, but it's interesting to think about that as in, okay, how did the capital and like the relationship with the districts develop into her being like that, as
Yeah.
opposed to just kind of assigning it to like, oh, she's just that type of character.
Yeah, they seem to have like really needed to like work to change that, and just take them out of chains, don't put them in cattle cars, like they made them into like celebrities for a moment, and it dehumanized them the way that we dehumanize celebrities, honestly, sometimes. And like it got rid of that need for like privacy and the things that you I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of things that you like expect people to give up when they become famous, and it kind of worked in that way as well.
Yeah, that is true. 'Cause, like, um, it's actually funny, speaking of kind of how things have adapted, I was thinking about Haymitch after he won the games and, like, the victory
Hmm.
tour and everything, and, I mean, granted, he obviously was going through a lot of shit, but I was just like, there's not a lot here about, like, what it went
Yeah.
through, and it was literally just, like, he got stuck in a cage and then like people looked at him. Whereas like with Katniss and everything, it seemed, and a lot of it, I think maybe it was also just because like the movies did such a job of like making everything flashy,
Yeah.
but just like explaining everything. Um, it
Yeah.
just
Putting
seemed
him in a
like
cage was insane.
I know, and I was like, okay, yeah, like they have developed them into like, okay, now you actually need to woo these people as opposed to
Yeah.
like just sit there.
That was absolutely wild. I also made a note of just like the insecticide, them
Oh
being sprayed
yeah,
with that. That was insane. Um,
Crazy.
the alliances that he had, it felt very similar to how Katniss managed Catching Fire, where she was like, I don't want any alliances. And he started out with like, I don't want any alliances. And then just kind of like having to do it. The newcomers as a concept and all of them walking on stage and being like, we are the newcomers. And I'm like, that's
Mhm.
really about to break my heart. And then it did.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like I loved the newcomers. I loved, like, reading about how that developed and also,
mhm.
like, how that played out in the media, because, we got the Caesar Flickerman interviews, and that was actually probably one of my favorite scenes was just, like,
Yes.
reading about, okay, what did the careers do? How did whatever panache get humiliated, and then like what were people's responses to like this new alliance,
Yeah.
um because like I imagine the capital lackeys that were helping each of the districts like did not help them in how do you, in your media training, how do you like play up this newcomers alliance? Um and so I don't know, it was like just a very good way to show like okay, these people are teaming together and they are
Mhm.
children and are able to come up with this. Look at what they can do and like who knows what they'll be able to do in the future.
Yeah. 100%. On that note, the fact that it was BT's
Oh
son
my
in the
god.
games, um, and BT's comment to Haymitch is the one that I wrote down where it was like, where he wrote, "It's funny, I was reaped the day that you were born," and I was like, "God damn, that's so rough." And then also just like the concept of like, yeah, BT like trying to start that revolution through his son, knowing that he did something in his games that like caused that rebellion. I know a lot of people have also been saying that they wanted Joanna Mason's games and just like, yeah, I feel like I just want to know, even if it's like a list, I want to know like what are all of the different ways that they tried to rebel beforehand.
Mhm.
Because everyone who showed up in that arena in the 75th games, like obviously had done something to piss off the Capitol. Um, and they were like, oh, this is like a really easy way to kill them off. But it was also just kind of like stupid. Like it was very much Snow being kind of arrogant. And I feel like that's part of like the whole pomp and circumstance that grew over the 25 years. I feel like as he started to be like, people are really seeing like the smoke and mirror, like are not seeing the smoke and mirrors of the games and like seeing all the pomp and circumstance around it and like kind of leaning into that and leaning into like how sparkly it was. He also kind of forgot that like, yeah, but behind the sparkle there was a lot that took to get there. And not that he would like forget what it took to get to that sparkle because like it was obviously his quote unquote hard work that got there, but like just what was lying underneath it. I feel like he kind of tricked himself too in the end a little bit.
Yeah, which I think makes sense considering, like, when you think about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and how he, at he did want to believe in the image, like, Lucy
Yeah.
Gray wanted to, or, like, kinda put on and, like, what life could be like. I feel like then obviously, the whole situation happened, so that kinda snapped him into his whole villain arc,
Yeah.
but, whatever, however many years later, of course he's gonna get a little complacent. He has a family, he has, like, a
That's a good one.
granddaughter, so I'm like, I think it's an excellent point to be like, yeah, he kinda tricked himself because, after however many years being super on the game, like, you have all the power, you, like, feel
Yeah.
safe, but obviously you're not.
He wasn't. Um, yeah. And then the other piece that I really liked, that really honestly I was very surprised about, and I don't know if this was it for you as well, but Plutarch already working for the rebels at the age that he was, and like starting with spinning the story, finding ways to get Haymitch and the others like what they needed as much as he could, and kind of being like, look, I'm gonna try, but like this is the transaction. And he was still kind of like it was still enough of a mask that like you didn't really see him as a double-edged sword. You just kind of like were like, why is he pointing the knife at me? And it's like, ha, joke's on you, like the blade's on both ends, but like which one's duller, I guess. That's a really weird metaphor. But
I like it
like
though.
that being said, like, yeah, I just
It's
like
on
I
brand.
really liked Plutarch's character and I really appreciate that he wasn't like he didn't just start out as a capital sellout. He was like, I think it's also like, at least right now, he just like has all of that privilege. And then he used all of that privilege for really good things.
Mhm. I feel like his story would be really interesting to read.
Yeah.
Because like you said, yeah, he is super young and I think like he like there's no indicators in the book to explain really how he started out in this, or like why he was involved in it, aside from just like
Yeah.
his ideals. So like, which that totally could just be it, in which case that's great. But I think it's interesting that given how young he is, he's still so like, he basically feels the same as his character in the Hunger Games. Like he
Mm-hmm.
already has that mass down, or that like ability to flip between, trying to help the rebels, but like still maintaining the Capitol facade.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think that's just like really interesting because he's not that old. So like, again, back to what is his story? Like, how did he get so good at it, or like,
What did he find in that library where nobody reads books anymore? Like, also that library broke my heart. I was like, oh my god. I think there was a, I don't know if, did you ever watch the movie Origins?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I think it's Origin or Origins. I can't remember if it's plural or not, but it basically was. It's a book that talks about like kind of like caste. I'm sorry, it's a movie. It is also a book, but it talks about like the caste system and like how we as humans kind of arrange ourselves into these castes and like where that impacts and stuff. And so one of the things that they were showing in that movie was there was like a scene in it of how the first things that the Nazis came for was intellectuals and books and things of that nature. Um, and just like seeing that reflected in this was just like, I was like, oh my God. And then I could like picture that like scene in the movie where they were just, it was just like a bonfire of books. And I think it's also really interesting that like Plutarch's family was able to keep enough books to keep a library just because like I don't know how they kept money and class and prestige, but also kind of like that's a weird thing to do. Like that's not allowed. So I'm like, I 100% agree with you. I really want to know what Plutarch's story was.
Who knows? Maybe we'll get it. I saw a rumor that someone wants Finnick's book, or like Finnick's book might be next. And I was like,
Mm. I
yeah,
don't know if I want to read another games in the
yeah.
arena. I think I just want to know what the list of rebellious acts are, but I don't think that I need to like.
You like want a history book almost, but from like
Yes,
the
I
rebel
want a
side.
history book. I don't want to read about children being slaughtered again for fun. I feel like that just gets painful for no reason.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Fair enough. Um, what did you think about Hamish meeting Snow like during the games? Because
Oh,
it's
that was
very
hilarious.
reminiscent of
Oh yeah.
Katniss.
Snow is like not afraid to show up and get in people's faces, which I think is really interesting because it just humanizes him. Um Also, the note that I have on here is Snow's age is like he's old as shit by the time that
Mm-hmm.
the 75th Hunger Games go on. And also he's just like been sick. Like Katniss was right in her like thing, and I didn't realize like the extent to which like he poisoned himself. But Haymitch and the milk, can we take a
Yeah.
moment for that scene?
Well, okay, I was just gonna follow up with that. When he gets the pitcher of milk in the arena, do you think that was Snow?
100%.
Right. But I'm like, so how does he know?
How does he know?
Because like that Haymitch drank the milk, unless he just like always knew. I guess that could be true.
Yeah.
But
Like
then
I
it's like,
think
go ahead.
oh sorry, go ahead, finish that.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, if he knew, then why? I guess maybe he just assumed Plutarch was oblivious and didn't know because Plutarch plays that like role so well. Because I'm like, it's kind of the same thing with how Mags and Wyrus and BT, like they all got punished, but like Plutarch seems to like come out unscathed. It's like, is he that good, or is like Snow turning a blind eye for some reason?
Yeah, I mean I think I'm trying to remember like the friend that Snow had in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes that kind of
So
helped him out.
Sejanus,
Yeah, so Janus, what was his last name?
I don't know.
There was no tie to the Heavens Bees, right?
No, not that I know of,
Okay.
because he
Yeah,
was
so my
like a someone who came in from the districts but like worked his way up into the capital, like his family, right?
oh yeah, first or second district, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, okay. Then well, I mean, I think part of me was like, oh, maybe he like saw a connection there between the way that the two of them act, right? But also I think for that one, like the way that I'm picturing it, it's like Haymitch is by the fridge. Plutarch's back is to him, and Snow's face is to what Haymitch is doing. But Snow is one, he's not like necessarily acting that he's sick and poisoned because like he is sick and poisoned,
Mhm.
but like I think that he's been sick and poisoned enough that he knows how to keep his wits about him throughout that. Like the way
Mhm.
that we've seen, like the way that we saw in the 75th and 74th area where it was like, oh, like he's definitely been poisoning himself for like a good chunk of time at this point. So I think that he did see Haymitch turn around, chug the milk, and then put it away and be like, oh damn, like that doesn't exist. I think he just like didn't call attention to it at that time because like why would you give them a martyr? It's the same reason that they didn't actually like that they brought back Lulu, right? So I think finding someone else to be Haymitch would have been like that just gets really out of hand. You're like, oh
Yeah.
fuck, like now we have so many people. And also like I think that it would have helped him kill someone off, but I think he also like it's one of those things where it's like know your enemy type of deal and he's like trying to assess.
That's fair. Yeah, I think I had pictured it differently where Haymitch is by the fridge, Snow's back is to him, and Plutarch's is
Ah,
towards Snow, but he just like wasn't paying attention. So that makes a lot more
okay.
sense when you think about it that way.
Okay. So yeah, the movie will be really helpful.
Yeah, but I mean, it
Tell
makes
us
sense
the
because
theory.
like there was no other like explanation for it if it wasn't.
Yeah.
So,
I think Snow's entire play is honestly like there are much what was it? There's like a line in something somewhere. Maybe it is this book, maybe it's not. But there's that concept of just like there are significantly worse fates than death. And Snow is like, and I'm gonna show you every single one of them.
yeah.
We talked about Effie Trinket saving the day. The fact that the 75th wasn't the second rebellion, which was what I thought it was. And just like, I think, yeah, the way that the story was written, one from Katniss's point of view, but also for like Ballad of Songbirds and Snake, and just like understanding like how many miniature rebellions they've tried to start. Um, so yeah, I'd be very curious to know like what happened around, well, I guess we kind of got an idea of what happened around the 74th Hunger Games was they were like, oh crap, we have a martyr now, so now we have to use this. And she became like a definitive image.
Switching topics, but
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I thought was cool about this book was how much more like Covey background and
Yes.
interaction we got, and how I guess like the parallels between like Snow and Lucy versus like Haymitch and Leonora like came through, or like the scene where Snow literally was like talking about Lucy Gray
Yeah.
and like ascribing it to Leonora.
What were your favorite parallels, or what were the ones that stuck out to you?
Well, I think the things I like that conversation particularly definitely did. And I think how much of a rebel like Leonora kind of seemed to be, in the same way Lucy Gray like didn't let, the capital necessarily take away the like shine and spark.
Hmm.
I feel like Leonora like also would just do things like
Yeah.
for what she believed in. Um and I thought it was cute how you had like Haymitch be like, oh, all the like colorful scraps that she wears. I wonder if that's, in tribute to this.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know if I have like a favorite parallels. I just thought it was interesting to read more about like the history, and also for Haymitch to like eventually find those gravestones, and like Lucy Gray's was there, which was interesting.
Yeah, I've seen the one like the theory that Lucy Gray is being there because I was very surprised when I saw that Lucy Gray was written in there, but it also like makes sense that like if someone is missing long enough, like I feel like it makes sense to put something in the grave.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also was just like, who's carving these gravestones? Because there's so many lines in them that like logistically that just seems like a lot. Um, but yeah, I agree. The Covey history was really interesting. And I also think it's like the extent to which the Covey got wiped out within those 25 years, it kind of just became like it was a mission, but like really it became a mission to the point where it like wasn't really a concept in the seam anymore. And it was just like there's no more orange paint with rebellion anywhere, and there's no
Yeah.
more Covey, and there's no more free thinking, and there's no more music and musicians, and like even at the time where all of this like all of their music and old songs and stuff were like not supposed to be sung, I feel like it was much more emphasized that like music in that way is really not allowed in District 12. like by the time we get to Katniss's time.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I agree with what you said. I think, again, going back to like how you can track the changes between these three stories now and like the influence from like one quarter quell to the next.
Yeah, I was also thinking like towards the end of the book, especially when I was like looking at like some of the edits and stuff when you saw like the ones from the two movies. One of the parallels that I wrote down, kind of like what you were saying, right, with Snow and Haymitch, was just like not only that they loved like women from the covey, but also just like they looked very similar. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
the way that they think and act and stuff like that are pretty similar, which like that's a thing that Snow like mentions a little bit about like how similar he is to Katniss or like how Katniss is to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like then we also see how like Katniss is similar to Haymitch and Haymitch is similar to Katniss. And it's like, wow, like you really just went down a line of like the same personality with like
Different
what that looks
outcomes.
like when you have compassion. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. I will say I'm was kind of also looking for this tweet that I read earlier about basically like Lucy Gray and Haymitch, and it's I don't actually know what social media posts or like it is, but it's a screenshot from some user that's like I miss them, but it wasn't a disaster, and says basically Lucy Gray is different from Haymitch and Katniss and Peeta because her tragedy is she caused the games to continue. If the
Yeah.
games hadn't become entertaining, they wouldn't have continued. And she made it entertaining because she was an entertainer. Because she was an entertainer. She saved herself, but she doomed dozens more because she performed too well and allowed the Capitol to make the games a performance in the later years. Haymitch's tragedy is that he couldn't end the games. Lucy Gray's is that she continued them. I was like,
That's
damn,
really well spoken.
yeah, like that's so real. And I think
Yeah.
like coming full circle to just like me being like, this wasn't my favorite book. I think going through, like you said, just read all these tweets and read all the or see all the TikToks to
Content.
yeah, like get to like read the connections that people have drawn because I like not always the best at remembering everything and slash it's just like been years since I've read some of these books.
Yeah.
Like I think that would have probably also increased my enjoyment, like you said, because yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like you can not that I didn't already think like Suzanne Collins was like a really good writer, but like you can see all these pieces that she set to like set the stage for the whole series and like what the message she was trying to get across.
Yeah, you can see where she went back into her old books and annotated the shit out of them to pull in specific details.
Yeah, which is impressive
Yeah,
and explains why these books take a long time.
they do. Yeah, this one, I feel like when I read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I really did not enjoy trying to read that. I really didn't like Snow's perspective because obviously he's like insane as a person. And it was just like, not like it wasn't enjoyable, but it was also just like a little bit terrifying to read that. And I feel like this kind of was everything that I wanted it to be in that respect. And then, yeah, I kind of liked that we got a little bit of a time jump where Haymitch was like, nothing is worth living for. And then he was like, fuck, now the sun can actually rise without being on a reaping. And that's when he started to fight again,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is just heartbreaking. I just, yeah, I was really not well at the end of this book.
I mean, that's fair. I did like the epilogue where Katniss like brought him geese eggs. I thought that was cute.
That was very cute. And it's like, why would anyone bring you geese eggs? What brings you joy about geese in life? There's a lot of things that brought him joy with geese in life.
But like they could have made it any other bird. But I guess geese makes
Yeah.
sense in terms of like when you think of them in a pet way. But I'm like, ugh, could have just
I
made
don't
it
think I've ever thought
chickens.
of geese in a pet way. I think I've thought of them as they have sharp teeth and are a very terrifying way.
That's fair. But I think it's like, okay, if you have a pet bird that she's like petting and parading around, I would imagine like geese. I guess it could be ducks too. Maybe
Yeah,
they should have done ducks.
I think, yeah, ducks. You could have done a swan. Throwback to when
Swans are
Gilmore
also
Girls happened.
terrifying though.
Yeah, but like they are, I think, a little bit like prettier on the
That's true.
outside, you know?
Fair.
Just like that scene in Gilmore Girls where Jess comes back and he's like, I got punched in the face with a swan. And it's like, damn. I think that was a lot of the notes that I had. I think the other call out that I had was Haymitch calling Katniss and Luella both sweetheart because one reminded him of the other and just like that hurt. I saw a lot of notes where he could have just like grown up being Uncle Hay or Uncle Haymitch, and that's
Mm.
just not what he was, and that hurt. With like Burdock Everdeen kind of just showing up.
Yeah, I did like the Burdock mention, and also just like
Yes.
literally, I feel like in books there's always like a few lines that are just like the simplest of phrases, but like literally kill me in the heart. And one of them was the
Mhm.
Beatty line where it was like, "Hey Mitch heard the sound of like Beatty's heart shattering into a million pieces."
Yeah.
In an unrecoverable way, or something like that. I definitely texted you. But the other
Yeah.
thing was just like Burdock brought her into town and was like so proud of her. And then the next line is like, and then when he flew up in like the mine, I was just like, oh, it's like so
This is
sad.
heartbreaking. And I think I just need, like, I gotta stop saying heartbreaking. I need to find a different word, but that's
But
really
it
all it is.
is, yeah.
Yeah, that line was really good. The other one that I was really like, oh shit with was when Amber was like, yeah, you should go talk to my dad. And I was like, oh my God, how is he going to talk to your dad? Like, and initially I was like, oh, like maybe because they're like one of the more wealthier districts at this time, like maybe they were able to like have some parents, or like if you had a special skill, like show up. And
Mm,
like BD had a special skill. He just was an ex victor.
yeah.
And that's what happened. And now I kind of also want to reread the Hunger Games books and just see who was manning the other booths in theirs, that like taught her all those other skills of like if there's mention of other victors. But yeah, Mags and Wyrus showing up and having sanity
Yeah.
was
And honestly,
wild.
Mags just being like another example, I feel like, of a character just being consistent between, not even across the whole book, but like between this book and like the Hunger Games. Like she
Yeah.
just seemed the same to me. And I was like, wow.
Yeah. She was very much like, it's okay to cry in front of Mags. And it's like, yeah, it's okay to cry in
Yeah.
front of Mags.
Like literally when the like sponsor our Mags like sent the soup like after,
Yeah.
I was like, oh
Yeah. And that was just like another example of like traditions kind of going to shit as the capital took over. Um, and like just not knowing what the soup was and all of that. And that sucked. And then I think the last note that I had here was just about the Justice Building and like knowing for that long that this was a place that wasn't bugged. And also just like the fact that they were all able to keep that a secret for so many years was wild, because I feel like the Capitol took so many other secrets along the way.
like you mean the scene with Plutarch and in the
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, in the District 11, like when he was doing the
the
victory
victory
tour.
tour. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It is kind of funny because it's like, did they not know, or did they have people who were helping hide or
Hmm.
like obscure the fact?
Yeah. And I feel like it had to have been obscuring the fact, because otherwise things would have gotten way worse in the 75th. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, damn, like this has been a rebellion and the rising for half a decade.
Mm-hmm. Which makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And they really won when ignorance was bliss for a minute there. And that's terrifying.
Yeah. Do you feel like Suzanne Collins put out this book? Like, do you think that she had already set her release date, or do you, yeah, like,
Yeah. I mean, I do think that she set the date, but I think that it like came at a very good time. And I feel like in editing and stuff, it was very much like this propaganda piece was made even more clear.
yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. Oh, I guess the one thing we did not get in, I guess, like any epilogue, we only got like, okay, he got drunk and went to visit the graves, but we didn't really get any more talk about like his mom or his brother. And I'm not, obviously, I know they died, but I meant like, it's not like he like tried to go see them or like reconciled with them, even in the epilogue. So I'm like curious because we got so much talk about Leonora Dove haunting him and like kind of what that looks like and how she was his soulmate. But obviously the other big part was supposed to be his family. And like, I feel like it kind of got dropped at the end.
Yeah, I feel like for that one, at least the way that I rationalized it in my head was like with Lenore Dove, he had made her a promise and was like, yes, I will stop the sun from rising on another reaping. And that was like something concrete that he could kind of work towards, where even when he was like in a blind rage, like that was fine. Like he could do that. But I feel like he also was just like, I want to know if somehow at the end of everything, like with Katniss and Peeta, if he ever visited his like mom and brother's
Mm-hmm.
grave, because I feel like that would have been the time to do it, when he was like no
Exactly.
longer like quote unquote dishonoring them, you know?
Yeah.
And like Yeah, I feel like it was just like that he just didn't have enough to fight for with them initially. Or
Makes
like,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, he felt like he had already lost that fight, I guess.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I definitely was thinking like epilogue too.
Yeah.
But also like time constraints.
What did you think of, yeah, what were you thinking about like that last scene? I know you mentioned that it was like you were kind of hoping for more on Haymitch's side. Like what were you looking for?
Are you talking about the actual epilogue or just like that last chapter?
Yeah, like that last chapter and like the epilogue. Like where would you have wanted it to stretch on and like get questions answered?
I honestly would have wanted like I just wanted more like post games him mentoring because obviously he was a
Okay.
mess of a mentor, but I think like I feel like there is either maybe I just read this from like some fan theory or just like it was in one of the books, but basically just like the idea being like even though he's a drunken mess at the beginning, he probably was not like, I'm just going to send these kids to die. And I imagine there is like something there. And it's like what happened over the years to like make it even worse, like to hit even more rock bottom. Which
Mm,
again does kind of just sound like I want him to read more about like the suffering and like his suffering. But I just think it would be like, I guess. I guess the point is like he hit rock bottom immediately and like it was just even worse from there, just mentoring the kids. So maybe
yeah.
there wasn't really anything to add there. Um, but I just think it would have been more interesting for me.
Okay. I think that makes sense. I think from what we had read so far and the way that he was introduced in the Hunger Games, it seemed like he had just sent those kids to die. Because he was like, one, the chances of them, like, I think he said for Katniss, he was like, oh, we finally have a fighter. And then also, I think that he had mentioned like that anyone who gets close to him and anyone who he shows any kind of love for, like, ends up dead. And so I feel like it makes sense that he would just be like, this is just what my life is now. I'm just going to be here in the capital and like, I'm not going to even try anymore outside of maybe like whatever rebellion pieces that they like Plutarch had him do, right? But I don't think that there was much. It so yeah.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
I think it just yeah.
That could be it. I think I was more thinking like the first initial years. I'm like, it feels. I guess maybe it was literally like he just was drunk all the time. I mean, like him being drunk like could explain away a lot of the things, but I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I think between like when he won and 25 years later, like obviously he would have gotten more calloused. But I think like in the first few years, I would have been curious to see like more about it. But that's again like
I think
personal
that's fair.
preference. It's not.
Yeah,
I
I'd be
think it.
curious if there was anything to see now that you
Yeah,
mentioned it.
yeah. But I think it's like in terms of his character, like it was complete by the end to the point
Yeah.
of like what we see in the Hunger Games. And it's not like hard to fill in the blanks. I just think again, it would have been interesting to me to actually read about it.
Yeah, to see like, okay, what was that actually like? And like is there any point that he did end up trying again? Because it seems like yeah, it seems like at least to me, it seems like he just gave up. But I would be curious to see if like he did kind of give up, but not completely.
Mhm.
With that, do you have anything else?
Um. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention that I thought was interesting was like, okay, so we see basically like this action and then reaction from the Capitol. So like, someone
Yeah.
does something in the arena that they don't like, and then we get a reaction. And I just find it very interesting, which maybe they just didn't like register or just like didn't think was that important. Was like, okay, everyone brought in their tokens, and those like tokens were then used to help blow up part of the arena.
Mm-hmm.
But fast forward to Katniss's games, and we still have those tokens.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe they were just like, we're doing a better job at scanning what these things are. But I just think that is interesting considering how much yeah, like they make upgrades to like, people's perceptions and they like keep constantly changing the games. But like this seems to stay the same throughout, even though it was used as like an act of rebellion previously.
Yeah, I think that's the piece though where it's like when we saw the overview of like what Haymitch's games looked like, especially in Catching Fire, and we were like, oh, like what parts did they leave out? And I feel like the piece where they had the trinket went along with that narrative of like kind of humanizing and making them celebrities. But there wasn't a single point where we knew that anyone's token could be used as a form of rebellion. So they were able to just kind of change that narrative. And like, yeah, I think they did get better at like checking to make sure that like the tokens were better. But I think that if they had gotten rid of the token, it would have just been like, I think that would have been something that would have riled up the districts more, and they made them fight back a little bit more. And they just like didn't want to give them like, what was that line that Snow said where he was like, you have to get rid of, like, you have to give them hope. What
Mm-hmm.
was that? Did he say that you have to give them hope or get rid of the hope?
I think give them hope. Because that,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like that went along with the concept of like giving them hope and letting them keep it and letting everyone see like that tie back to the district and like the reminder that like no matter what, like if you are from a district, you will still be crushed and your symbolism of your district will continue to be crushed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that was my take on it. I was like, these trinkets make a lot of sense to keep.
Yeah, I think that's a good I think you're right. Like that's an excellent point I hadn't thought about. Um
In just a vindictive way.
yeah.
Um,
But do you have anything else to add?
I think that was mostly it for me. The only other I'm like the only other note I had, and then I named like 5 other notes.
Moon.
Um, I listed the concept of angels and religion because the word angels was mentioned in a couple of songs, and I realized it's really funny how in this case the concept of religion didn't play a role because I feel like in a lot of other cases um, when you see this kind of dystopian society develop, when you see things in history like with Nazis and things like that, like everything was kind of based around religion. And in this case, it's really fascinating that like religion was not used to wipe everything out; they just used climate change. Um, And then I thought that the pinky promise was a really sad moment. And then I made a note about there was like an early celebration with the songs. Um,
Wait, early celebration. Say more on that one.
you make an excellent point. I wish I could. Um, I have it in between Haymitch repeated Plutarch's advice, angels and celebration. I'm sorry, angels and religion, and then early celebration with the song. So I don't know. I'm going to cut that part.
Okay. Wait, maybe it's didn't he like sing a song in his head or something before he thought he died? But I don't
Oh,
is that it?
yes. Yeah. Um,
Okay, cool. Moving on.
yeah. I don't know. There's just a lot more music in this one
Yeah,
than
there
I
was a
really think
lot.
I expected. Did not read those lyrics well enough. It's
Oh
very
yeah, I
disappointing.
really skimmed a lot of those.
Yeah. Oh yeah, finding the game makers was also like I'm like, damn, the Capitol really learned from that one because that's insane.
Yeah, that was unexpected,
Hmm.
but I guess it was a good way to get Maisie Lee to die, if that makes sense. Like as a plot
Yes,
device to get to
it
her to die.
was. Yeah, it definitely was. It was also just like I don't know why the fuck you would send game makers in. Like that's wild that it was like but I'm also like, who is updating this technology? Like, who has the space to be innovative enough to have improved capital technology this much over the course of 50 years? So,
Good question.
and yeah, I think that was all my notes. The way that the book ended with Katniss and Peeta being mentioned, it really completed all of this name dropping.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I liked that it all ended on hope.
Yeah,
And
I
we got that
agree.
kind of tied up. And also the last thing that I had, which I didn't totally write down, but what is his name? One of her uncles, the Tan Car,
Amber Tan
Amber
and
Tan,
Car.
and also the just the last bit of it was one of Lenora Dove's uncles did make it to 13 with his fiddle.
Oh, did I miss that?
Yeah, it wasn't explicitly mentioned, but they mentioned
Oh,
in
Clerk Carmine is the other
Clerk
one,
Carmine.
and Tam Amber.
Yeah, Clerk Carmine made it to District 12 with his fiddle, and that was really sweet.
District 13.
Yeah, sorry, District 13.
No, you're good. You said it right earlier. Wait, so this I'll have to look for that.
Yeah. It wasn't noted in the book itself. I think this was a connection that I saw.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I probably that's yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I just liked that like we got enough in this book and like enough and honestly like the name dropping in this book that you could make a lot of these ties and kind of put names to faces and understand like why Katniss's mom got headaches and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um so yeah, I think we made it through my 36 notes.
No, they were
Did
good.
you have any additional notes?
No, I've just been thinking about stuff as you have said things, so this has been great. I'm glad you had a lot of notes because I feel like it was good to spark
Yeah.
stuff for me.
Well, it was a good book. I'm looking forward to our next round of blind date with the book.
Yes. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed. Please let us know what you guys thought of Sunrise and the Reaping and send us all the memes and or not plot devices. Connections that you've seen, because honestly, again, now that I have finished the book, I think I can go back and like start, seeing all the TikToks people have made and probably will start crying. Anyways, follow us on Bookish Haze Pod on TikTok and Instagram, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for our blind date with the book.
Bye.
Bye.